June 12, 1944. Just after dawn, south of Isigny-sur-Mer, Normandy. Mist clings to the hedgerows like damp wool. The lanes are no wider than a cart, banked by earthen berms and thick with beech and hawthorn. Somewhere beyond the wall of green, a carburetor coughs, once, twice, the way a man clears his throat before speaking. A German private named Emil Hartmann, Grenadier, 352 Infanterie Division, rests the heel of his hand on a sun-warmed Pack-40 barrel and grins at the sound. Die Ronsens, he says to nobody in particular. Lighters, one hit and woof! He pantomimes a match. The loader chuckles, nervous and eager, the way young men laugh to press their fear back into their boots. Down the lane 100 meters, a U.S. tank commander named Staff Sergeant Joe Calder, 2nd Armored Division, stands half out of the open cupola of his M4A1 Sherman, headset snug, goggles fogged with his own breath. In the turret with him, T4 Tex Martinez, gunner, a man whose hands never stop moving when he's tense. Below them, Eddie Russo, the quiet loader from Boston, whose rosary knocks softly against his pocket. And at the controls, Corporal Benny Short Hop Levitt, left hand on the steering levers, right foot fluttering the accelerator like a nervous sparrow. The tank smells of clutch dust, oil, and last night's coffee that someone forgot to cap. Calder taps the radio throat mic. Able 3, check net. Across the bocage, voices answer, flat, clipped, professional. Able 1, up. Able 2, up. Able 4, tracking. He can hear, too, the mechanized heartbeat of the column behind them, another Sherman, then a half-track with a rifle platoon from the 29th Infantry Division, then a dozer with welded prongs ready to bite a hole through the next hedgerow. Somebody's humming "I'll Be Seeing You," off-key and soft. Calder raises his binoculars over the hedgerow crest. The glass fills with nothing but leaves and morning light. He swallows, hears the faintest metallic click from somewhere ahead. A breech block, maybe, cycling on an anti-tank gun. He says, "Button up! Tex, watch that gap at 1 o'clock. Eddie, AP in the tube." Beneath his boots, Russo hauls a shell from the ready rack. The turret clutches with a complaint of gears and hydraulic whine as Martinez traverses right, nudging the crosshairs toward a shadow between two trunks. Levitt snorts a laugh under his breath. "Ronsens, huh? Here's hoping we don't do any lightin'." Across the lane, Hartmann's squad crouches like patient cats. The gun commander, Feldwebel Kruger, breathes through his nose, slow and measured. He holds up a single finger, then presses his palm down, steady. They've buried the trails of the gun into the hedgerow bank, camouflaged the shield with fresh-cut boughs, laid spare rounds, armor-piercing capped, on a torn ground sheet. Behind them, 2 men with Panzerfausts crouch in a shell scrape, eyes fixed on that same gap at 1 o'clock. Somewhere to the left, an MG-42 chatters briefly and falls silent, a warning nip, nothing more. Kruger mutters, "Wait until you see the whites of their eyes. No, the star on their front plate." For a heartbeat, all the world narrows to breath and leaf and steel. Then the hedgerow ahead of Calder shivers, there and gone, like a curtain unsettled by a draft. Martinez sees it too. "Contact, 1 o'clock, low, in the brush, possible 75. Calder doesn't waste the second he's been given. "Benny, left track, feather. Tex, on, fire when the mark's clean." The Sherman's nose dips as Levitt eases it forward. Calder ducks, slaps the hatch shut, and the world becomes the round ring of the periscope and the warm, close darkness of the turret. He hears the gun, his gun, clack as Martinez settles the elevation. Russo's breath, quick and measured. The radio, alive with someone far back, calling for engineers with Bangalore torpedoes at Hedge 2. Kruger's finger drops. The Pak-40 kicks like a mule. Dust explodes from the shield. The shell hisses down the lane, a razor whisper. It strikes the Sherman's glacis just to the right of the differential housing. Sparks, a hard ringing thump that shivers the tank like a bell. But it doesn't bite. Welded plates, luck, the oblique angle, maybe all three. In the gun pit, Hartmann blurts a curse he'll never remember. Kruger's already shouting for the loader, Nachladen, and the breech snatches another round like a greedy mouth. Again, lower. Cowder doesn't wait to be hit twice. On! Martinez answers with a breathless up and pulls the Turk Leinard. The 75mm roars, the hedgerow gap erupts into splinters and leaf shreds. The round slams into the earthen berm a handspan low, dirt geysers, showering the lane with black soil. Short, elevate one, HE next, HE! Russo's hands move in a blur, the new shell slides home, the breech snaps, the ready rack clinks. Another Pak flash spits. The second German round skids high, gouges the mantlet, and screams off into the trees. Levitt swears, throws the Sherman left across the lane, tracks clawing, engine howling. The torso-turning motion jostles Tex's sight picture. He chases the reticle, teeth bared, whispers, come on, hold still." Calder steadies his own breath, makes his voice a metronome for the men inside his steel world. "Tex, send it!" The second American round goes where prayers and practice meet. The hedgerow gap vanishes in a white-orange bloom as the HE round pops. Shrapnel raking leaves, splintering the shield, knocking Hartmann flat and sending Kruger spilling sideways with his mouth open, the order dying on his lips. The loader, alive by miracle, scrabbles for one more shell. One of the Panzerfaust men, ears bleeding, eyes wide, lucks his weapon on his shoulder and rises into view as if jerked by strings. Calder sees the shape, the long tube, the telltale stance, and hears himself shout across the net before thought catches up. "Faust, right! Right! Coax! Coax!" Martinez slaps the butterfly trigger, and the coaxial 30-06 unspools a stream of stitched daylight through leaves and body. The man drops without a sound, the Panzerfaust thumping harmlessly into the dirt. "Calder, push the bank, now!" The tank crawls into the hedge, its welded prongs biting, engine screaming protest as clods of earth slide and roots snap like old bones. Behind Calder, as if the tank's roar had nudged a sleeping giant, the column stirs in earnest. Another Sherman's bow appears in the periscope slit, then a third nose behind that. To the right, an American bulldozer angles toward the hedgerow, blade low, like a horned beast lining up a charge. Hartmann, dazed, tastes blood and dirt and the bitter grit of shattered leaves. He blinks up at the ruin of the gun shield and hears Kruger's voice somewhere to his left, harsher now, a human sound wrapped in pain. Beyond the hedge, more engines, more than before, more than should be there, multiplying like trout in a stream. He drags himself to his elbows and looks through a tear in the branches. The first Sherman he knows, the one he fired at, the one that should have lit like a match, pushes through the hedge wall itself, green paint raked with claw marks of earth. Behind it, another M4 waits. Behind that, another. He thinks suddenly of a joke he told yesterday to keep the men steady. Hit the first, and the others will run. But the others are not running. They are arriving. And far to the south, beyond the bocage and beyond the day's horizon, a man in a different kind of uniform rolls an inflatable tank out of a truck bed and measures the distance between dummy tread marks with an artist's eye. Sergeant Arthur Shilstone of the 603rd Camouflage Engineers, 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, hooks a pump to the rubber hull and begins to breathe shape into deception. A mile away, men in the 3132 Signal Service Company Special test a record of armored columns, the low thunder of treads captured on acetate, spliced and looped, a soundtrack for a ghost formation that will march at midnight. The Germans will listen. They always do. Calder leans into his mic. Able 1, this is 3. Gap open. AT gun suppressed, moving through. Keep it tight. He doesn't see Hartman's eyes through the leaves, or the moment laughter dies and something colder takes its place. Realization. It isn't just that the tank didn't burn, it's that the tank he can see is only the start of a line he cannot see the end of. He thinks wildly, stupidly, of library shelves, book after book after book, and imagines them all are tanks. From the mist and the hedgerows, the sound thickens. Engines, tracks, the slap of boots. Someone shouted, "Medic!" and the bright crack of a garand. And under it all, like the double bass that no one notices until it stops, the steady grind of logistics, the appetite of a machine that can feed. June 12th bleeds into the 13th, one field at a time. The sun lifts, the mist burns away, and the bocage shows its real shape. Hand-high earth banks, topped with trees that have been pruning themselves for a century, trunks fused into living walls. Every orchard is a room, every lane a corridor. Calder's platoon moves by the new catechism. Stop short of the hedge, infantry climbs, peers, points. Tank bumps up and takes the push. Gunner breathes, squeezes. Driver wiggles the nose through. Repeat. In the headsets, the SCR 508 nets are now a crowded party. Company CP, battalion fire direction, engineers hawking Bangalores like door-to-door salesmen. Somewhere in that crush of voices, a calm captain keeps saying, "Keep it simple, keep it moving." On the German side of the green wall, Feldwebel Kruger sits with a field dressing cinched under his ribs and plans how to survive. The POC is done, shield torn, sight bent. He has Hartman, 2 other men scraped from the hedges, 1 extra bandolier of 7.92, and a Panzerfaust the shaken trooper didn't get to fire. Their company map is a dirty rectangle, more lie than truth. Lanes shown straight that twist like snakes. Fields sketched as neat squares that in reality pucker and bulge. Kruger has learned to trust his ears over any pencil. He hears engines, but not just the steady chew of one tank. It is the shifting chorus of several, sometimes fading too far and then swelling again, closer, as if the same tank keeps reappearing in a different place at once. He glances at Hartman and for the first time says the quiet part aloud. Merera, several. Calder parks his tank low behind an apple tree and pops the hatch to taste the day. The orchard smells like broken fruit and hot metal. Tex, eyes along that lane, he says, tapping the periscope. Eddie, HE on top, AP next. Benny, you see that dip? If something barks, we crab right. A rifleman from the 29th, with mud to his elbows and an M1 hanging from a sling like a tired arm, leans up on the sponson. Sherman, he says, bless your heavy heart, there's a farmhouse yonder with too many holes that look like windows. Calder nods. Bring your boys up on our hip. We'll knock the shutters off first. They do it like a drill. The gun speaks twice, the house exhales dust, and when figures pitch out the back door, the infantry's garands crack in a short, decisive paragraph. Nothing showy. The next field, the next hedge. At a T-junction choked with nettles, Martinez whispers, "Don't like it." He can't say why, he just doesn't like it. The hair at the back of his neck notices a small thing, the way the leaves don't move where heat should shimmer. Calder listens to his gunner's superstition. Smoke it. 2 rounds of WP splash the little crossroads, and a hidden MG-42 coughs itself blind in a white cloud. The platoon whips through while the machine gun crew coughs and curses in a ghost world of their own making. By afternoon, the column swells. More rifles, more dozers, a tank retriever towing a Sherman whose track pins look like popped buttons. A supply truck noses up with 75mm rounds stacked like loaves. Calder watches the hands of the driver, steady, unhurried, like this is a job he's done many times. It's the part the jokes never include, The men who arrive exactly when the racks run low. The water cans that are always somehow full. The tank that was burning this morning and is now riding piggyback to a shop where men with welders make it new again. Waves aren't only numbers, they're the rhythm of everything that feeds numbers. At dusk, marauding 88s begin probing the lanes. Sharp, flat slams from somewhere the maps don't admit. Panzer Lehr has slipped elements forward, crewmen with careful eyes, guns sighted down long hedgerow tunnels nobody knew were there yesterday. A shell slashes the lane behind Calder and holsters itself in a ditch embankment without bursting. Levitt swears it blinked at him. They creep the platoon out of that corridor by inches, each tank pushing a different hole through the green to deny the German gunners a second invitation. Night brings a different war. Engineers wrap their shovels in rags and tamp mines into the verge. The infantry sleep in turns with boots on and helmets pillowed on canteens. Calder stretches on the rear deck under stars the same as home, except that these ones glitter above an orchard full of steel hearts ticking as they cool. Somewhere to the south, the low rumble of armor passes. Not on this lane, not in this field. It sounds big, bigger than what the battalion roster says is nearby. Calder thinks it's a brigade sector over, maybe a column on the move to relieve a pressure point. He shrugs, tucks that thought away, and lets his eyes slide shut. What he hears is real steel, but also the careful thunder of imagination. 3 miles away, on another lane, the 3132 Signal Service Company Special is setting up their giant horn speakers on tripods, men moving like stagehands in a theater whose audience is hunting them. Wire spools unreel across ditches. A sergeant with a pencil mustache checks a log sheet where each minute is scripted. Clanks, gear changes, shouted commands, the squeal of track pins, layered recordings made up country. He says, "Run set Bravo," and the night begins to tell lies in a very convincing voice. A phantom armored column seems to pass in the black, headed east. 30 minutes later, a different clatter circles north. The power of suggestion is physics when the suggestion is loud enough. Kruger and his scrap of a squad hear it all and draw the wrong map inside their heads. Hartman counts. He can't help it. 2, no, 4, wait, that's a half-track mixed in. Kruger hushes him and stares through the slit of a barn door at a lane empty of everything but darkness. The sounds move, cross, divide. He pictures battalions where there are none, tanks where there are speakers, space filled by shadows that sound like steel. When the first real American patrol edges up to test the crossroads, the Germans fire as if they're stopping an army. The Americans fall back, mark the muzzle flashes for the morning's artillery, and move their actual route 2 hedges over. The Ghost has done its job. Attention drawn, ammunition burned, fear fed. Near midnight, a truck without markings trundles into a copse, and men heave canvas off shapes that look ridiculous until they stand upright. Tanks that weigh as much as air. An artist from the 603rd Camouflage Engineers steps back from his inflatable M4 and squints down the hedgerow. He shuffles it a few feet to where tire ruts already smudge the lane, and then he presses one heel into the dirt, dragging a shallow track that would fool any man in a hurry. These are jokes too, if you like. Rubber tanks and records in the night, but they are jokes told with a straight face, with a punchline that lands at dawn when binoculars sweep a hedgerow and send a report up the line. Armor massing on our left. In Calder's turret, the world has shrunk to the soft murmur of the radio watch and the rasp of Eddie Russo whispering a decade of Hail Marys. Sleep comes the way it always does at the front, sudden and total, until the net snaps awake with a voice from company. "Able, stand by to move at first light, new axis." Calder blinks grit from his lashes and feels the tank around him like a patient animal ready to stand. In a lane 2 hedges over, speakers power down, rubber tanks sigh, and ghosts fold themselves back into trucks. When the light comes, The map will lie in the enemy's favor, and the real line of Shermans will roll through the page nobody expected them to use. June 14th, 1944, near Saint-Clair-sur-Laelle. The dawn is pale gold and gray. A light fog still drifts through the bocage, carrying the smell of cordite and wet clover. Crows hop between burned-out wagons. Every few seconds, something explodes miles away, and the sound lags across the valley like a slow heartbeat. Staff Sergeant Joe Calder peers out of his periscope. The countryside is waking up, not with birdsong, but with the cough of engines. Behind him, an endless line of Shermans, M10 tank destroyers, and half-tracks stretches down the lane. To the north, bulldozers chew at the earth, carving crude ramps through another hedgerow wall. The 2nd Armored Division is advancing again. "Looks like they want St. Lo by breakfast," mutters Tex Martinez, leaning on the gun breech. Calder doesn't answer. He's watching something. Shapes in the fog across the valley, dozens of them, motionless. For a moment, he thinks they're tanks, hull down behind a rise. Then one of them wobbles slightly in the breeze. He grins. "Not this time, Tex. Those are ours. Rubber kind." A mile away, men of the 603rd Camouflage Engineers are inflating another line of decoys. Canvas tanks swell and stiffen as air pumps hum. Some sit half-collapsed, like sleeping beasts waiting to wake. Private Robert Conrad checks the silhouette through binoculars. Looks good enough to fool Jerry's Luftwaffe scouts. Beside him, an artist paints shadows and grease streaks where light should fall, blending illusion into landscape. To the Germans miles east, reconnaissance photos will soon show what looks like a full U.S. armored division massing for a push toward St. Lo. Panzerlehr's headquarters will panic, shift artillery, even recall a reserve column to guard a flank that doesn't exist. That's the beauty of the Ghost Army. Their battlefield isn't made of mud and blood, it's made of perception. Across the line, in a village cellar, Feldwebel Kruger listens to the thunder of Allied artillery beyond the ridge. His bandaged side throbs with every concussion. Hartman is there too, scratching notes on the back of a ration label, gun positions, smoke columns, movement patterns. None of it adds up. "They're everywhere," he says, shaking his head. "We hit one column yesterday, 3 tanks, and today there are 20, maybe 30. Kruger stares at the boy, the notebook trembling in his hands. "Listen to me," he says softly. "It's not 30 tanks, it's 1 tank and 20 ghosts." Hartman frowns, unsure if it's a joke or madness. Kruger continues, half to himself. "They did it to Rommel in Africa. False units, radios talking to ghosts. They're doing it again." Outside, the Germans are repositioning, dragging a Pak-40 into a new hedge, calling for Luftwaffe reconnaissance. They think a major American push is building to their south. They don't realize it's a stage play. Inflatable armor, recorded engines, and fake radio chatter carefully scripted by artists, actors, and engineers. Every night, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops shifts the illusion a few miles, making the Phantom Army seem to march. And while the Germans stare at the mirage, the real armor, Calder's armor, slips through the seams. Midday. Calder's armor column edges down a sunken lane toward Hill 192, the high ground east of St. Lo. Every few minutes they halt, engines idling as engineers probe for mines. Dust hangs in the air like chalk. Infantrymen crouch along the banks, faces striped with sweat and shadow. "Seems too quiet," Eddie Russo says from below. "Yeah," Calder mutters. "Too quiet is never quiet." Then, like an angry god clearing its throat, the hedgerow ahead detonates. A hidden 88mm gun fires point blank. The first Sherman in line bursts into a bloom of flame, its turret lifted off as if plucked by invisible hands. Men dive for ditches, machine guns chatter. German infantry, hidden in spider holes and behind hedges, unleash everything they have. Down, reverse, Calder shouts. Levitt throws the Sherman into a grinding crawl backwards. Martinez swings the gun toward the muzzle flash. AP loaded. Send it. The gun cracks, a thunderclap in the enclosed lane. The shell slams into the hedge, tearing open a hole the size of a door. Smoke and screams pour out. Again, Calder orders. By the third shot, the 88's fire stops. When the smoke clears, the crew is gone, either dead or fled. Calder climbs out, scanning the field. His men are shaken, but alive. They knew we were coming, Martinez says quietly. Calder nods. They always do, but they never know where from. What neither man knows is that 6 miles to the south, a ghost column is rolling through another lane, recordings echoing through the hills, drawing German fire and attention away from Hill 192. The deception works again. Real lives are saved by rubber and wire. That night, as the sky burns red from artillery strikes, Calder's crew bivouacs beside a Norman farmhouse half collapsed from shell fire. Tex Martinez sits on the turret, strumming a few strings of a broken guitar he picked up in Isigny. Eddie Russo cleans the gun, murmuring prayers for the tank that burned ahead of them. Calder writes in his notebook under the weak beam of a flashlight. He doesn't write about battles, only names. Joe, Bill, Adams, Ray, gone at point 123. He doesn't know it, but a similar list is being kept in another notebook across the valley by a German sergeant with the same handwriting and the same hollow in his chest. A sudden noise, distant at first, then closer. Engines, many of them. Calder straightens, listening. Levitt tilts his head, brow furrowed. "You hear that?" "Yeah," Calder says. "Sounds like a whole division on the move." They climb out, peering into the dark. The sound swells. Tracks, gears, voices, the metallic symphony of hundreds of tanks. But no lights, no silhouettes, just the sound. Tex laughs softly, disbelieving. "Hell, Joe, that ain't us. That's them." Calder shakes his head. "No, that's the other kind of armor." And somewhere beyond the tree line, in the hands of men wearing the same patch as theirs, but carrying no guns, massive speakers are pumping that same chorus into the night, convincing every German within 10 miles that the Allies are coming from everywhere at once. In the fog and distance, Hartmann hears it too and feels his stomach twist. He clutches his rifle tighter and mutters, "They're endless. They just keep coming." He's not wrong. Because whether it's steel or sound, the Americans have found a new weapon, one that doesn't kill, but conquers the mind. And tonight, on the road to St. Lo, the laughter that once followed the name Sherman has finally fallen silent. June 15th, 1944, near Saint-Lô, Normandy. The morning begins not with the thunder of guns, but with something stranger. Stillness. Dew clings to burned-out chassis like frost. In the half-light, the fields shimmer with heat mirages, smoke from the previous day's shelling drifting lazily across craters that steam like open wounds. Joe Calder sits on the glacis of his Sherman, a cigarette cupped in his hand. The tank's armor plate radiates warmth from the idling engine below. Around him, the column reforms, mechanics tightening track pins, infantrymen checking BARs, and medics ferrying stretchers toward an aid station marked by a flapping red cross. From a ridge a mile away, a small American convoy is already setting up a performance. Trucks roll to a halt, men in paint-splattered fatigues climb out and begin their ritual. Canvas sheets unfold, compressors cough to life, and within minutes, hulking silhouettes rise from nothing, an armored battalion that exists only in the eye. A corporal from Calder's platoon watches, brow furrowed. "You believe that, Sarge? Rubber tanks?" Calder exhales smoke. eyes fixed on the distant figures. I believe in anything that keeps them looking the wrong way. By mid-morning, reconnaissance reports flood into both camps. To the Americans, enemy armor repositioning east of Sunlo. To the Germans, large U.S. armored division forming near Pont-Hébert. Both are half true, both are half lies, the perfect ratio for confusion. In a church basement commandeered as headquarters, German Major Wilhelm Rabe pins red strings on his wall map. They're flanking again, he mutters. The Americans, they're multiplying. He doesn't know that half the units he's tracking are nothing more than dummies, the handiwork of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Their mission? Misdirection. Their weapon? Belief. Somewhere behind the lines, Sergeant Stanley Nance, a radio operator from the 3132nd Signal Service Company, adjusts a transmitter dial and begins the day's deception. His signal mimics the traffic of an entire armored division, codes, call signs, field chatter, even the hum of idle carriers. The enemy's intercept operators will pick it up, triangulate it, and dutifully move artillery and armor to counter it. And while that phantom army keeps the Germans staring south, Calder's real platoon moves west, threading through hedgerows toward the true objective, the high ground beyond Saint-Lô. Late afternoon. The sun burns through the haze, and the fields glitter with shell fragments. Calder's tank leads a narrow column past a line of ruined cottages. Every few yards they halt while engineers probe for mines. From somewhere up the road, the deep thump of artillery drifts back. US 105s firing in slow, steady rhythm. Eddie Russo breaks the monotony. "Joe, you ever think about how many of us there are?" Calder looks down from the cupola. "You mean tanks?" Russo shakes his head. "People, trucks, planes. Feels like the whole damn country's sitting right here in Normandy." Calder smiles faintly. "That's the idea. They threw everything they got into this. Ships, steel, rubber, ghosts, whatever it takes to make us look unstoppable." Ahead, a sharp whistle, then the high mechanical shriek of an incoming shell. "Incoming! Down!" The shell bursts 50 yards away, flinging dirt and branches like shrapnel. Calder ducks into the turret. Russo yells, "We're fine, no hits." A second round follows, closer this time, an 88 finding its mark. "Smoke out! Move!" Calder snaps. Levitt slams the throttle. The Sherman lurches behind a stone barn as white smoke blooms across the field. Outside, infantry scattered to ditches, some laughing nervously, others shaking with adrenaline. Over the radio, chaos. "Able 2 hit! Requesting medics!" Calder's hands tremble slightly on the hatch handle, just a flicker, before he steadies them. "All units, mark the flash. We'll make them regret that." Moments later, Martinez finds the source, a hedgerow gap halfway up the ridge. "I got your flash, Joe. Give me AP." "Up!" Russo calls, slamming the shell home. "Fire!" The Sherman roars, the gun recoil jerking the turret like a punch. The shell streaks across the valley and punches into the hedge. For a breath, nothing. Then a secondary explosion tears the foliage apart. "Direct hit," Martinez says softly. Calder nods, but doesn't smile. He's seen too many direct hits to celebrate. When the smoke clears, the enemy gun is gone, but something else catches his eye. A figure, running across the ridge, stumbling through the mist. German. Young. No weapon. He's waving his hands, shouting something intelligible. Calder lowers his binoculars. He's surrendering. As infantry swarm forward to capture the prisoner, Calder stays in the cupola, watching the boy's face as he's led past. The German can't be more than 19. Mud streaks his cheek, his eyes wild, darting from tank to tank as if counting ghosts. He mutters under his breath in broken English, "More tanks, always more tanks, never stop." Calder doesn't correct him. That night, under tarps and blackout lamps, the deception units move again. Rubber Shermans defleet with soft sighs, folded into trucks and driven east. A convoy of sound trucks pulls into the woods, engineers loading reels labeled Column Noise Variant B and Half-Track Loop. In the flickering light, they look less like soldiers and more like magicians packing up after a show. Sergeant Shilstone, the camouflage artist, leans against a jeep hood, sketching the day's scene in charcoal. A valley filled with tanks that never existed. "Tomorrow," he says quietly, "we'll make them reappear somewhere else." And they will. Each night, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops paints a new battlefield onto the canvas of Europe, forcing German generals to fight phantoms while real divisions strike elsewhere. June 16th. Calder's company crests a ridge overlooking Saint-Lô. The city below is a ruin. Blackened rooftops, church spires cracked open, the streets choked with rubble. But from here, it's clear the American tide has not stopped. Convoys stretch to the horizon. Tanks like Calder's crawl through fields in endless lines. Hartmann, somewhere in the ruins below, peers from a shattered window. His face is streaked with soot, his eyes hollow. He whispers to no one, "They have more tanks than we have men." In a way, he's right. Not because every Sherman is real, but because the illusion feels real. That's the victory the Ghost Army was built for. Calder watches the columns snake down into the valley, engines growling, sunlight glinting off hundreds of identical turrets. For a long time, he says nothing. Then, almost to himself, "They laughed at these things once." He crushes the cigarette under his boot and climbs back into the turret. "All right, boys, let's keep rolling." The Sherman lurches forward, treads biting the earth, one tank among thousands, both real and imagined, carrying with it the sound that would echo throughout the rest of Europe. The unstoppable grind of an army that never seemed to end. March 18th, 1945, near Wessel, Germany. A black dawn presses down on the western bank of the Rhine. The air smells of cornite, diesel, and thawing mud. Mist coils around the trees like a living thing. In the half-dark, American engineers stand hip-deep in the shallows, hammering pontoon fittings by touch and memory. Every strike echoes like a drumbeat, masked by the distant rumble of artillery from the far shore. Farther inland, the men of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops prepare their last great act of deception. Sergeant Arthur Shilstone wipes rain from his sketch pad, squinting at the river valley ahead. "Let's make them believe the main crossing's downriver," he mutters. Beside him, Lieutenant Fred Fox, their operations planner, unfolds a map under a flickering lantern. "We've got one night," Fox says, voice steady. "The real boys go in at Reese. We make them think it's Wessel." Trucks roll up carrying inflatable tanks, artillery silhouettes, and stacks of plywood planes. Generators cough to life. Within hours, the floodplain blooms with a phantom army. Canvas Shermans crouch under netting. Wooden jeeps line muddy roads. Men with flashlights and smoke pots walk their beats, creating the illusion of endless activity. And above them, radio operators of the 3132nd spin a web of false transmissions. They chatter on dozens of frequencies at once. Reports of bridge-laying, tank columns, ammo resupply. To the German listeners across the river, it sounds like 2 whole U.S. divisions massing for a major assault. 30 miles north, in the ruins of a church tower, Oberst Heinrich Fuchs of the 15th Army peers through his field glasses. He sees exactly what he expects: a vast concentration of armor below Wessel, floodlights and truck convoys snaking through the fog. He turns to his adjutant. "They'll cross here," he says. "Every sign points to it. Alert the batteries along the south bend." Orders race down the line. The Wehrmacht's artillery pivots toward the Phantom Army. Dozens of 105mm and 88mm guns align their barrels on Ghosts. Back on the riverbank, Calder's platoon waits in real silence far to the south, the real crossing point. His Sherman's engine ticks softly as it cools. The men speak in whispers, eyes glancing toward the black water ahead. "Can you believe it, Joe? They're fooling half the German army with balloons again," Leavitt murmurs. Calder nods slowly. "Yeah, And every minute they're staring at those balloons buys us one less shell on our heads. They move at 00200. Assault boats push from the shore, the oars muffled, the river whispering against their sides. Engineers follow with floating sections of a pontoon bridge. Across the current, German artillery begins its furious answer, but not here. The shells scream down miles north, exploding harmlessly over empty fields and rubber tanks. As Calder's Sherman rides the first completed span, he glances back over the dark water. The far horizon flashes like a false sunrise, fires burning in Wessel, where the 23rd's illusions are being shelled to rags. He knows those men are unarmed, their only defense a lie so convincing it's now drawing real fire. God bless those crazy artists, Tex says softly in the turret. Calder just nods, jaw tight. By dawn, the deception has done its work. At Rhine, the real U.S. Ninth Army is across the Rhine. At Wessel, the Phantom divisions still smolder under the shelling they were meant to invite. When reporters later ask General William Simpson how they achieved such surprise, he simply says, "We had help from some very imaginative men." Later that day, Shilstone and his camouflage team walk through the ruin of their own creation. Inflatable tanks lie punctured and half-collapsed, their rubber skins shredded by shrapnel. Plywood jeeps are splintered, their painted dashboards scattered like confetti. A lone sound truck smolders, its speaker cone bent inward by the blast wave of an 88. Lieutenant Fox surveys the damage, hands on his hips. "Looks like we fooled 'em," he says dryly. Shilstone nods. "Yeah, they bought every bit of it." Then he looks up, toward the rising smoke on the far side of the Rhine. Across that water, he knows, real tanks, real Shermans are now climbing the eastern bank. For the first time, Allied armor is rolling into Germany proper. Every foot gained is a testament not only to firepower and steel, but to imagination, the quiet, invisible weapon that wins before a shot is fired. A few hours later, Calder's platoon pushes through a shattered German hamlet east of the river. The houses are roofless, the roads gouged by tank tracks and bomb craters. The locals peer from cellars as American columns pour through. The war's rhythm has changed. The endless waves that began in Normandy have reached the heart of the Reich. Calder parks his Sherman beside a broken signpost, Wessel, 5 kilometers. He climbs out, breath steaming in the cold. For a moment, he just listens, the sound of hundreds of engines idling, of mechanics shouting for tools, of soldiers laughing in disbelief that they made it this far. Eddie Russo leans from the loader's hatch. "Think it's almost over, Joe?" Calder looks east toward the smoke rising over the Rhine's far bank. "Yeah, I think so. But I don't think they've stopped being surprised yet." That night, under a quiet sky, the real and the false finally meet. In a field lit by campfires, Calder's platoon parks beside a row of deflated rubber Shermans. Tex walks over, booting one gently with the toe of his boot. "Damn thing looks just like ours," he says. Calder runs a hand across the sagging turret. The rubber smells faintly of fuel and paint. He smiles faintly. "Yeah, only this one don't break down." For a long moment, the two men stand there, watching the fires flicker across a landscape that's half war, half theater. Then Calder says softly, "Let's get some sleep. Tomorrow, we keep rolling." Behind them, the river glimmers in the moonlight, a ribbon of silver separating the old world from the new, the realm of deception from the hard truth of victory. The laughter, the disbelief, the mockery, all gone. What remains is the steady, unstoppable hum of an army that could not only fight, but imagine. And somewhere in the distance, a faint echo of engines, real and recorded, fades into the night, carrying with it the final illusion of the war that fooled the world.